Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by Congressional reporter Kate Scanlon. Kate, there was a political comeback attempt made by former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin. It did not go the way that perhaps the former Republican vice presidential nominee had hoped. Talk a little bit about that race and what some of the complexity, because there's an interesting dynamic in that race, a wrinkle that makes it a little different than
There's
most.
a couple of interesting dynamics in this race. So first of all, this was a special election to fill the seat of the late Don Young, who represented Alaska for almost 50 years.
Right.
This is a political comeback attempt by Sarah Palin after, almost 10 years after she left office, or more than 10 years, I should say. And the thing about this that's interesting is it was also a test of Alaska's new ranked choice voting system. So there's a lot of things going on at once. And this was essentially part one of a two-part election, because this special election is only to fill the remainder of Don Young's term, ending in January. And then the November election will be for the new term starting in January.
Sure.
So the first phase of this election did not go as Sarah Palin and former President Donald Trump, who endorsed her, would have wanted.
Right.
The Democrat Mary Peltola was successful in the special election, and so for the general election, she's going to go in as the incumbent, which gives her a little bit more of an edge than she even had for this one.
I mean, Sarah Palin, governor of the state, mayor of Wasilla, was on the 2008 Republican ticket, was at one point kind of a conservative media superstar.
Yes.
Seemed to have burned some bridges, though, at home, resigning the governorship early and, not really being as active maybe in state politics as some people would have preferred. What does this show about her future, her political future?
So it is an interesting dynamic there in Alaska. While she has this national profile and a lot of conservative activists really like her, she did burn some bridges at home when she came back after her unsuccessful presidential bid and resigned as governor. Before the conclusion of her first term, a lot of people kind of thought that was a bid to keep her national celebrity and kind of resent her for that. And so it is this interesting dynamic at play that even though Alaska is a red state and Sarah Palin has this huge national profile, she can't just, ride that to Congress essentially.
Right.
And Mary Peltola's victory is indicative that she's going to have a tough road in November as well.
A lot of different kinds of salmon in Alaska?
There are. I actually had the opportunity to speak with Mary Peltola recently, and I learned there are many more varieties of salmon than I originally understood there to be.
I was just kind of fishing for that one.
Yeah.
But so in Pennsylvania, there's a Senate race going on where a lot of other food items have been hotly debated, but also, it's been a competitive race between Dr. Oz, John Fetterman. Fetterman's been ahead, starting to see a little bit of narrowing. And they're really starting to go after each other in increasingly personal ways.
It's become an increasingly nasty race. Yeah, there was that video of Dr. Oz that was kind of widely mocked of him discussing rising inflation and crudité, mispronouncing the name of a regional grocery chain, which is, a big red flag in Pennsylvania.
Right.
And, John Fetterman was able to really successfully fundraise off of that gaffe. And then there was some nastiness that increasingly happened after that. Dr. Oz, a campaign spokesman for him, said something to the effect of, if he'd ever eaten a vegetable in his life, he wouldn't have had a stroke.
Right.
And the Fetterman campaign hit back on that pretty hard. And, there's been some chaos about, a potential debate between the two of them as well now that's tied to this. So it is getting increasingly personal with bringing his stroke into this campaign in a way that kind of reminded voters of it since he returned to the campaign trail.
All right, I mean, it's a difficult situation in that obviously if he can't debate, that does really make his health a legitimate issue in the campaign. But a lot of people feel like the Oz campaign, maybe not the candidate himself, but certainly some people working for the campaign, have been pretty ham-fisted in how they've raised it.
Yes, so I'm not sure Fetterman allies would cast it as a matter of whether or not he's able to do the debate so much as like whether he wants to do the debate with some of the commentary about his health Dr. Oz has been making.
Right.
So it is that personal element of it too, but on the other hand, allies of Dr. Oz would then be able to paint it as a health issue for John Fetterman. So it is this just increasingly personal race in one of the most competitive races in the country.
The issue of abortion has come up in this race. Obviously, that's a big issue in a lot of races in this midterm election, particularly after the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. Pennsylvania was the state at the center of the last constitutional challenge to Roe versus Wade, Casey versus Planned Parenthood. Talk a little bit about how the candidates have been going back and forth on that issue.
So there was some recently resurfaced audio of Dr. Oz from a primary event before he was the official nominee, where he was questioned by a voter, essentially asking, why should we believe you when you tell us we're pro-life, because you weren't always pro-life. He is running on an anti-abortion platform as a candidate, but has made comments as recently as 2019 expressing concern that Roe versus Wade would be overturned, calling himself worried about that prospect. So people were skeptical, and he did manage to win the nomination, but I think he still has ruffled feathers really on both sides, where you have Democrat activists criticizing the position at all, but then you have some more anti-abortion Republicans who are like a little bit hesitant about whether or not they can really trust him. So the issue this week came to new prominence when Dr. Oz referred to abortion as murder in these resurfaced comments. And the Fetterman campaign hit him really hard on that, calling that an extreme position. But a lot of pro-lifers do hold that position. So it is an interesting difference of opinion we're seeing between these two candidates.
And so more broadly, we're entering a point in the campaign where I think we're going to have a little bit better idea of how things are going to go, but it's still relatively early, end of summer. What are we seeing, though, overall, especially in terms of these Senate races? Are Democrats feeling a little bit more optimistic?
They are feeling much more optimistic. You have a lot of Democrats out on the campaign trail talking about winning a 52-seat majority. That seems to be the goal, which in the minds of some of these arguments are tied to things like the filibuster, arguing that they could potentially make some really significant changes if they had a bigger majority. Now, whether or not they'd actually be able to do that, if they do win a 52-seat majority, remains to be seen. But they are coming at it from a much more aggressive position than they were even a few weeks ago.
Because you wouldn't need necessarily Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema anymore.
Exactly. Now that would hinge on every other Democrat agreeing to do that, which I'm not sure that support actually exists when push comes to
Manchin and
shove.
Sinema have kind of taken all of the heat for this.
Yes, and nobody wants to, throw themselves into that mix. But and there might be some varying degrees of opinion. There might be people who are willing to bypass this filibuster on certain individual matters by setting precedent. Exactly, but it gets hard to do carve-outs that work for one issue but not another, especially if and when Republicans would win a majority. We saw a little bit of this back and forth between Harry Reid and Mitch McConnell when it came to judges for the Supreme Court. So there's a lot of different things at play there, but a more aggressive campaign strategy from Democrats could put some of these calls to remove the filibuster a little bit more in play than they would have been previously.
So Democrats kind of hiding on this issue are filibusted.
Exactly.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
You can read Kate and the rest of our political team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.